Blood satellite.
We're going to lead into a discussion of an interesting book. And the book is titled Bronze Age Mindset.
Oh, we're starting today. Here we go.
It's by Bronze Age Mindset by an individual named Bronze Age Pervert, who needs no introduction. One of the towering figures of the space. Everyone knows
His
him.
real name is very white sounding, though, I promise.
His name is Constant Alamiru. Constant yada yada yada.
Like, pow, I'm sugar bear, bitch, shot down.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought he was white. I thought he was a white hero, like a demigod. Is he not? Is he actually like is he a short brown academic? A short gay brown academic at Harvard? Oh no.
You're thinking of academic agent. What we're talking about. Hey, I'm
sorry. I mix Constantine and AA up all the time.
Old Constantinople over here. We're actually going to get more because the next episode will be his second book published under his real name,
which has a much cooler name.
This was by Bronze Age Pervert, so I'm actually going to keep it within the context of his character,
all right.
His online persona.
Fair.
But we talked about this once before, and I wanted to mention this, and I'm probably going to release this clip before this episode comes out, because I never released the clip of this, although it is in the episode. We discussed Bronze Age Pervert and his work when we were reviewing the book Sun and Steel by Mishima. And I'm sure he would take this as a compliment, because even in this book, he speaks very glowingly about Mishima. There's a lot of people like Yukio Mishima, his plays, his fiction. But when we reviewed Sun and Steel, I'm just going to let people find the clip. I'm going to release it. But that was our original foray into this. And I took the position, I think Andrew Joyce had published an article saying that people should really stop glamorizing Mishima. Because if you...
Yes.
All his fiction aside, all his art aside, if you look
at
a
neurotic gay man.
He was a neurotic gay man who not only ended his life in a very tragicomic way and pathetic way. People like to lionize his suicide through seppuku after a failed coup. That's how they propose it. Mishima died leading a group of 4 guys to try and take over the military, while having brokered no other relationships in the military.
Yeah, he was retarded.
He was a dumb asshole. Got up there, gave a speech. Everyone said, "Shut the fuck up," and then he killed himself out of shame. He coincidentally, I suppose, had a fetish for violent suicide. A lot of people forget that part, where he was obsessed with taking photography of himself, and he would write in his diary about how he was almost turned on or fetishized, a bloody, heroic death. There was an eroticism to it. This guy was a very sexually confused,
he was
and broken,
a twisted, degenerate weirdo.
Yeah. So if you look at his suicide, you are seeing a guy at the pinnacle of jerking off.
Go to horny jail.
No!
Just look at
That's
the bone.
what that was. And sorry, continue.
No, I was just saying, when you look at his death, look at the erection. That's the first thing you should notice, is he died with a boner.
Take out the magnifying glass. But more interestingly is that this was a guy who was fixated on the martial life, on warfare and dying a glorious death. Interestingly enough, and this is even included in his biopic, if you look at his early life, he had the option of being conscripted in the Japanese military, I believe during World War II. Yeah, World War II, because he came to fame in the wake of World War II. But he was very weak and cowardly, and found a way to bullshit his way out of fighting in the army. So in his real life, he was a coward, but would try and adopt this militaristic life. It's just embarrassing. Anyway, I likened that to the Bronze Age Pervert character as someone who is trying to adopt a warrior ethos, but is also, as we will see in this book, a very sexually confused individual. And we'll get into that in a second, but also leading young men in a profoundly aesthetic way of life, not so much in a genuine warrior's way. But the point was, look where that gets you. Reading Sun and Steel, you can read Sun and Steel and you can like it and you could be very profound even, but to me it's impossible to separate that very serious personal philosophy from where that philosophy led him, which was a very pathetic, sexually strange death. So like it's someone larping as a warrior and trying to grope for the warrior's lifestyle but never realizing it. Anyway, that's how I likened those two things, because I did not detect an actual warrior, an actual man who understands the martial life, who is adorning himself with that regalia, and how that can lead a group of committed men into some real dilemmas. So we're going to talk about that. I was going to tee this up with something else. You know what? I'll just mention this because I want to steel Man's position as much as I can, because despite everything I just said, I want to take his ideas seriously. It's very easy. There's a lot of people out there who are going after Bronze Age Pervert, and they'll say things like, "You're gay," or they'll say things like, "You're Jewish," and they're right.
True.
These are correct things to say, but I always detected something kind of dark and nefarious lurking inside of it. And that's a bombastic thing to say. I'm being a bit dramatic, but there's always something off about it. But I really wanted to get into it and take it seriously, because, for one, there's a lot of our listeners who like Bronze Age Pervert and who like this book, and a lot of people I know, people I respect, read this book and had good things to say about it many, many years ago when it came out. Many of them don't remember it as well as they think they do, and we'll remind them today what it actually says. It's a very easy book to gloss. It's not very long. It's written in a very casual way, stream of consciousness, very irreverent. There's a lot of people who like it, and you're allowed to like it. And I said this before: if all that Bronze Age Pervert did was convince some young men to get into lifting and lead some kind of better life, good for them. I'm not here to disparage anyone who's on a better path because of something. My take, though, is that I don't think most people got into bodybuilding or fitness because of Bronze Age Pervert. I think most people were already doing it and they just found something that they like. You listen to dubstep while you work out. Did you get into working out because of dubstep? I bet you didn't. You know what I mean? So I would say that most people, like, if you are living the life of a Roman savage, you might say that he helped you, but I don't think he did, because to me, a lot of people credit aesthetic posting and the fitness culture in this space to Bronze Age Pervert and the Vitalist movement. Look, I'm an old head. I know that prior to these guys on the scene, there was already a burgeoning fitness movement in our space, and it was a lot of the time it was on right-wing forums, it was on Nazi forums. But we've been about working out and lifting and hiking and survivalism before this guy. I don't think he really triggered any renaissance in that. And that's me having lived through this.
Right. And the problem with it before is it didn't have a gay Jew whose only skill was social media and academia at the head of it to give it broad appeal. So to say that this didn't exist before, oh no, it existed, and it was actually much healthier and pure and had a much smaller but more devoted audience. But it takes a gay Jew at Harvard to launch that on Twitter. That's why it never exploded on Twitter, which is his actual achievement.
Yeah, and also, just not to really hammer this too hard, because I do want to start with the good things, but keep in mind that this is an individual who, he is an academic. He, I believe, has a doctorate in, I think it's anthropology or philosophy. Like, his thesis paper was what became his second book. So remember, despite
Very Chad having a doctorate. Sorry.
having a doctorate in the humanities or
Yeah.
whatever the fuck it is.
So yeah.
Yeah, he's not that, he's not that different than Paul Gottfried or Leo Strauss. Rather, he's not that different from Leo Strauss. In fact, he he very frequently cites Leo Strauss as one of his heroes and one of his prime intellectual influences, to the point where he was talking about like the Straussian neocon intelligentsia scene as like one of the coolest rebellious places a young mind could be. This is in the second book. I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's interesting. We're keeping this in the Bronze Age mindset for now, but it's all tied together. The reason people like this sort of book is because they're confronted by articles like this. I'm just going to glance over this article just to give some setup. I'm looking at Bloomberg. The headline is, this was published the end of last year, September 2023, but it's still relevant now. The title is, Corporate America Promised to Hire a Lot More People of Color. It Actually Did. Subheading here, the year after Black Lives Matter protests, the S&P 100 added more than 300,000 jobs. 94% went to people of color. There's some people in our spaces who were saying, like, look, okay, this DEI stuff is out there. They talk a big game. Are they really hiring all these non-whites, or is there really all this employment under the table? No. It's really only white people being kicked out of the job market. So I'm going to read a few things here. For a brief moment in 2020, much of corporate America united around a common goal: to address the stark racial imbalances in the workplace. Mass protests sparked by the murder of George Floyd led to a flurry of company promises, both specific and vague, to hire and promote more Black people and others from underrepresented groups. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission requires companies with 100 more employees to report their workforce demographic. In total, they increased the U.S. workforce by 323,000 in 2021, and the most recent year which the data exists. The overall job growth for white people is 20,000. The overall job growth for 20 people of color is 302,000. 94% of the headcount increase went to people of color. And this includes 23% of it was Black, 22% Asian, 40% of the new jobs went to Hispanics, and 8% to other races. So the biggest shifts happened in less senior job categories, but the trend continued up the job ladder in top high-paid jobs too. Companies increased their racial diversity amongst executives, managers, and professionals. It says here, white people still hold a disproportionate share of the top. Like, what do you mean? So what it's saying here is white people are disproportionate, but it says here 63% of managers are white people. That doesn't sound disproportionate given the population, does it?
They should all be white.
It's our country. I know it is 100%, but also like they're just not using the word disproportionate. Like what is proportionate now? Is proportionate being 20% to them?
Yeah,
I think that's not.
It's
what
a
they're
totally
saying.
Arbitrary distinction.
Yeah. But that share. Let me just go down here. And not only that, it also says here that not only were more non-whites hired purposefully, but all of the job losses that occurred during COVID were disproportionately white people. So less white people were hired, more white people lost their jobs. That is purposeful, right? I'm not going to spend too long on this, but again, there's this misconception on our side that the data is secretly on our side, and it's not. What we are seeing is a purposeful removal of white men specifically from the job market. It depends what disproportionate is defined as in their minds. I think proportionately white men should have 0 positions. That's what they think. That's what they're saying. I don't think that. But what we are seeing is a rising up of the global south. That's what this is. Like all non-white means is global south. That just means brown people generally. It means non-white. So people see this and they turn to things like the Bronze Age mindset, which, to its credit, talks about how he would not be seen, in my opinion, as a white nationalist. Bronze Age Pervert would not call himself Nazi, a white nationalist. He talks about more,
Nietzschean,
Nietzschean.
like master morality shit.
Master morality,
Will to power.
and even in his articles, if you read his articles, because he publishes those and he writes in a different way, but he is a Nietzschean. The Vitalist movement is Nietzschean in the sense that it's master versus slave morality, and it's sort of implied that the masters should be whites or whites and Jews, because he would group, and that's where he says there is a unity between whites and Jews, and that they are the masters of their domains. And this is something that he's criticized for being a Zionist. He will deny it, but honestly, he denies a lot of things that he admits later. So that's one thing. Like, I always, when I'm talking about Nietzscheans, there's a lot of Nietzscheans, followers of Nietzsche. A good example would be Uber Boyo. Uber Boyo he produces lots of content. We had him on the show. I find Uber Boyo speaks very plainly. He's very open about what he thinks. Whereas with Bronze Age Pervert, he's always talking out of both sides of his mouth. The problem with Bronze Age Pervert is that even when you read this stuff, you're never sure what he's being serious about. He will be contradictory. He will be hypocritical. Some people say that's part of his charm. I just think it's annoying and frustrating. And it's
so quintessentially Jewish. Like, couldn't you just do a non-Jewish thing, like for fun, like as a bit? Why do you have to be so Jewish?
There's nothing about Nietzscheanism that means you need to be so ironic and sarcastic and need to like oversell your points to make it sound like you don't actually mean them, but then admit you mean them later. Like, it's a lot of fogging your own issue, which I don't really appreciate. And even now, I bet I've had many conversations with Bronze Age Pervert fans, even within our circles. And I found that there's like a conceptual or some kind of psychological wall there where I will say, hey, he said this. And they'll say, no, he didn't say that. He's never, find me where he said that. And then I'll go to the article, copy and paste the entire paragraph. I'll show it to them and say, I don't read it like that. They'll say like, that you're misreading. I'm like, no, like I'm highlighting the sense where he says like, whatever the point is, like, I'm just saying I will show them a quote from him and they will deny that he means it the way I think I'm claiming that he means it. And I've never encountered this before with any figure, with any writer, any intellectual. I've never seen such a fan base that when confronted with the things he says will deny that he said them. I'm anticipating that reaction to this. Probably. And that's why I'm trying to be upfront with that. Look, there's some good things in here. I feel like I'm diffusing a bomb when I talk about this guy because I'm really trying to get it through to these people that I'm not coming out of this with bad faith, right? I'm not. I read this seriously because they will say, "Have you read Bronze Age Mindset?" And I had read parts of it, but I never actually sat down and read front to back and took notes. And I don't think they've read it either. I don't think most people have read both of his books. And when I quote the books to them, they're surprised. On this show, many, many episodes ago, we were talking about this new thing called vitalism, or it was being proposed as a new sort of spiritual political project. And I had said at the time, it sounds interesting. In the same way that the pronatalism movement, to me, sounds interesting. But the more you delve into it and start to untangle it, you find a bunch of really kooky things in there. So, when I heard guys like Curtis Yarvin talk about this thing called vitalism, it sounded okay in the sense that you are trying to apprehend what helps life propagate most effectively. Okay. And there's a kind of science to that as well. There's the necessity of spirituality, but an appreciation of beauty, and it's life affirming. It's pro-life, but it's also, in a sense, a eugenicist movement because it says there's a certain quality of life, and it's trying to ascertain what behaviors and what values allow life to propagate most effectively at its highest level. I'm like, okay, that ties into certain scientific theories and even some certain spirituality that. The purpose of life is to propagate itself most effectively and be on the side of propagation effectively without limit. You would hear Christians and Catholics agree with that too. I'm like, okay, That I see what you're trying to synthesize here. But then you look into how they define beauty and how they define, truth, and how and that's where things start to fall apart. So what I'm saying is, whereas once I'd be like, oh, this vitalism movement sounds interesting, the more I got into it, the more I started to see the cracks. And that really had its genesis in Bronze Age mindset, because if you look at Bronze Age Pervert currently, there was a big drama surrounding him recently, involving some friends of ours, close friends or tangential friends. Meta Prime was involved in this, where there was I don't even want to go too much into the controversy, but what had happened was there was a transgendered freak of nature named Pariah the Doll who ended up in this magazine called Man's World Magazine, run by Raig nationalists, who I know, who I've talked to. I'm not going to get into the weeds on who was responsible for that or how that happened. Anyway, there was a big kerfuffle about this presence of a tranny in a Vitalist outlet. And Bronze Age Pervert publicly on Twitter was, not on the side of trans. He's not like a tranny endorser, of course, but he was puzzled by this Puritan reaction to it. And he was saying that, look, I don't like trannies, but I would choose trannies over these moralists, these Christian moralists. And that to me is the heart of it. That to me is like, when presented with like a Christian or someone who he thinks has these virtuous people. He doesn't like virtuous people. He likes the degenerate. He likes the dirtiness of the rebellion of the periphery of society. So to me, that's important. How he defines vitalism is always going to be aligned with the seedy dark corners. He will choose a mentally ill, damp-looking man in a dress trying to subvert every community he goes into over, Christian nationalism. And he won't deny that. He said this openly. And I'm like, well, how do you get to that? How do you get to soft transgender endorsement? How do you get into all this like weird shit that's going on in the Vitalist scene? And again, there's good people in there, but there's a lot of fucking strange people in there. So how do you get there? And I think it starts with Bronze Age mindset. It's not like there was some turn that perverted the Vitalist scene. It has to do with these fucked up individuals. Having said that, let's see how it started. Bronze Age mindset. I've given enough preamble. He starts with this part here, and I think this really sets it up. How he views, and this reminds me of Mishima in a sense. And I'm going to read it just as he wrote it, because he writes in a very annoying way. He writes in that sort of fake accent he speaks in, but not all the time, only sometimes. Right? So he says, Here was Empedocles, a philosopher, a man of high vision. He jumped into volcano Etna in Sicily because he knew he would be reborn as a god. Now imagine yourself in front of rim of Etna. It's dry and sandy. You feel the heat, but it's not like you thought it might be. It's not romantic. It's just hot, dry. You can't breathe. And the smell of infernal sulfur and wet earth, and even worse things, triggers an old memory or instinct to run. You're brought face to face with the vehemence of brutality of rock. If it were great fear, that could be your spur to action, but it fills your nostrils with banality and dullness. It seems like nothing to you because in your eye it's nothing. So you pull away from it. You're not reborn as a god. You remain a mule. What Mount Etna was to Empedocles, is there something like that to you? Is there something like that at all anymore? Basically, he's saying that he wants to capture that essence that would drive someone to jump into a volcano and become a god, or more likely die in a volcano. That's how he tees up the entire book. So, and this is where he gets into Nietzsche again, very early on. The distinction between master races and the rest is simple and true. Hegel said it, copying Heraclitus. Those peoples who choose death rather than slavery or submission in a confrontation, that is a people of masters. There are many such in the world, not only among Aryans, but also the Comanche, many of the Polynesians, the Japanese, and many others. But animal of this kind refuses entrapment and subjugation. Now that I actually, okay, I agree with that. There's going to be
Yeah,
things
it's all
like-
true, but it's also just straight up copied from Nietzsche. Like, it's not his writing, so.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. There's a few individuals he cites pretty frequently in this book and the sequel. One is Nietzsche, obviously. The other is Camille Paglia, if anyone knows her.
The weird lesbian?
Yeah, the weird lesbian
The
feminist.
weird humanist lesbian, yeah.
And Leo Strauss, the Jewish neocon, the center of that entire intellectual movement. So really, it's those three. Those three come up a lot. There's others he quotes. He quotes other older sources, other Greek philosophers, but it seems to me that those, in his own admission, had the greatest imprint on him. And I'm like, well, that's very revealing, I guess. And to me, if I dislike 60% of what someone says, but like 40%, I'm going to assume that 40% is stolen from somewhere else. So the things I like in this book the most are Nietzsche, you right? But it's like I find the way you write bad. I find this character kind of annoying. It's not funny or interesting. And then a lot of the ideas that's just him riffing are really bad. They're dumb and wrong. He
Yeah.
says, and we'll get to that in a second.
I don't see that brought up often enough. Like, he is, engaging on Twitter and social media, but as an author, he's an atrocious author. He's a really, really bad writer.
It's not good.
It's embarrassing when people. It's one thing to say I enjoyed the book for the content, but to say he's such a great writer, I'm sorry, you don't read a lot apparently, because he's not. He's bottom of the barrel writing.
Yeah, it's bad on purpose, or it's like slam poetry. Anytime someone says to you something's like slam poetry, they're just saying it's bad on purpose. But that's like, I always ask, like, well, you know what? I get why you might do that. Here's what you could do. Why don't you try writing something good?
Why don't you try to achieve something? You know what bad on purpose is? Slave morality.
Yeah,
that's what it. I love being weak. I'm doing it as a gag. Isn't it fun to suck? Yeah, thanks.
You would slave morality irony. You would slave morality fucking sarcasm in prose.
Constant sarcasm, never saying what you mean.
You hear the slave morality being like a Jewish guy on the internet saying weird shit. You would slave morality having Nick Fuentes confront you in a fucking Twitter space and you cower like a fucking sad faggot and not fucking not engage with the 5'2" Mexican ruler of the white race.
That's so sad.
You're Jewish? You're gay? It's like, what do you say? I do not understand. I don't. This fucking faggoty Borat Zizek voice that we all must endure. Oh, I love listening to the gym. Have you tried literally anything else? I'm going to listen to Caribbean rhythms while I'm lifting. What the fuck is wrong with you? I guarantee that makes your lifting worse.
Yeah.
You might as well listen to fucking Gregorian chanting laid over fucking porn modes.
Yeah. I was gonna say I'm old school, so to me Caribbean rhythms is just bossa nova.
Yeah, well, you listen to bossa nova and also listen to yacht rock. Listen to literally anything at the gym. You listen to podcast. I talk a bit. I stutter, and every interview I am in, I stutter, I stammer. I always sound unprepared. You ask me question. I say why you ask me question. I'm now a vampire. I speak like faggot Jewish kike Dracula.
You ran off with the DD Kong, triple espresso, personal hotspot, stem gripper runts. There are consequences to your crimes against Dracula.
He's Zizek if Zizek wasn't a sex machine. If he's incel Zizek.
Here's where he starts off. And this is just an aside that was kind of interesting, but he says this is sort of his anti-evolution position. And I don't know if he still stands by a lot of this, but I've never heard him renounce any of it. But he says there's not enough time, nor enough number of specimens, nor the kinds of mutations observed to support either natural selection or Lamarckianism as explanations for evolution. Many of the mathematical models for how a trait will spread in a population have failed. They don't tell you this. I don't know what they mean by they don't tell you this.
Is there a source? Is there any citation there for that? Of course not.
He said no.
He's an academic, but he's one of those academics. Yeah.
Now, and here's where he's kind of going against evolution. And I don't know, like to me, you can debate about the true genesis of life or the development of certain life forms on Earth, but to me, it seems that natural selection has been observed, though. Whether it's good or bad, it seems like genetic traits are just inherited.
It's so observable and so well understood that if you want to argue against it, you'd have to take like a philosophical, religious, spiritual, metaphysical approach. But his launching point was studies have shown empirically it's false, and then doesn't quote the study.
They don't tell you this. What? Huh? This is a guy who
guy's such a joker.
A doctorate, by the way. Okay, so here goes. A truly objective or scientific approach to life would be to start without assumptions, which is what biologists do. But whatever. Make no big stories. Take animal and study. Study what it does in nature, not lab, when left alone from human. Again, I read that.
Does he think that biologists don't study animals? Like he's claiming that our understanding of evolution comes from biologists studying animals in labs.
This is one of those things where this was so dumb that I had to make sure I read that properly. I think he thinks that everything we know about animal systems and behavior was gleaned from labs. Here's actually a fun thing a lot of people don't know. In our space, we talk about the male hierarchy, the alpha, the beta, the sigma. A lot of that was popularized by Vox Day. And that has its origins in wolf packs, wolf animal systems. What's interesting is that they found that description really only worked for wolves in captivity. The clear leader and then everyone else below the leader. They know this because they studied wolves in the wild. Because they've been doing that since time immemorial. Like we know that the actual way wolf packs operate, it's a lot more dynamic. If you look at how a pack travels, you actually have the oldest leading the pack, the oldest wolves, because they set the pace. You have the strongest wolves in the middle. So these would be the most physical specimens, right? Physically dominant. Then you have like the mothers and the children, and the leader's actually at the back. But the leader is neither the oldest nor like the strongest and possessing of the most brutal savage strength. Well, that's like, we only know that because we do most of our studying of animal systems in the wild. Now, that isn't to say that there's no such thing as a leader, but the qualities that make an actual leader are probably a bit more nuanced, like the qualities that represent a human leader. And I think in most animal systems, based on what we know. Anyway, point being, that was the dumbest shit you've ever read. Like, why even write it? Oh, he's riffing. I'm like, what? That's like a retard riffing. You might as well have Down syndrome when we're talking about Beyblade. Yeah. I would rather hear that. I'd rather hear someone with a bullet wound in their frontal cortex talk about Spider-Man.
Talk about trains, yeah.
Yeah, you might as well talk about trains. See, study different specimens, the mood, the behavior at time of year, in different places, at different levels of fortune and well-being. Make no assumption about what it wants ultimately. So, yeah, and so this is him, like, planting this seed that, like, science is wrong, study is wrong.
What he's describing is the correct way to do science. It's the way that we do science. He's gaslighting the reader into thinking that he just invented it now and that... we should start. It's like, sorry, naturalists have been doing that exact thing since the Renaissance. So what the fuck are you talking about?
I'm going to read this part next because I know we got to move along here. And I think about this one a lot because I really think I'm going to take this as true, this next part. Because I think this is how he lives his life. And this is more revealing about his real worldview. So here it is. He says, just a few weeks ago, I was outside nightclub in city that is still untouched by first world regimented hygiene, like well-lighted, clean streets made safe for women come at a high price for the mood of a city. In this place, the government and bureaucracy couldn't extend its rules and cleanup efforts even if it wanted. There are then many nooks and hidden corners in that are under no one's control. In this no man's land, there's mafia, so many perverts. There is some crime, but it's kept mostly very low or nonviolent because it's full of off-duty cops and such. I find life without such refuge to be almost intolerable. So here I felt free, but I think was after a day in a haze and the glycine was kicking in. I must have taken 600 milligrams theanine as well. And after much coffee, I was spacing out under vicious neon yellow lights. I stood looking at the bouncer almost in a trance. I wondered what it was like to be him. So let's step back from that and imagine, let's again say it's true. So Constant is in some second or third world sex tourist place, some dingy fucking crime and pervert and drug-addled shithole country, saying that these are my people. I feel comfortable here. Life without this would be intolerable. And here's him strung out alone, by the way, just a guy on his own, not talking about being with friends, sitting, staring at a bouncer, saying like, what must it be like to be that icon of masculinity? That to me captures his entire that's his entire essence, is him living as a fucking degenerate lush in a fucking shithole with cum on his shoe,
So
staring at a real man.
there's so much there. Even the fact that it's a foreign country, because he's a shiftless, soilless Jew. Like of course, he's in 100 different countries, none his own. And he hates the government. He hates, normative systems and rules. He has to be where there are no rules. He loves being surrounded by degenerates and mafia. He says he can't survive unless he's high and surrounded by degenerates. Like, is it? So you're telling me? Look, this is my first time hearing it. People read this and liked it. They thought that it was like inspiring.
As I was reading it, I'm trying to be fair here. I'm trying to steel man it. It was really not good. It was really dumb. And I'm trying to read it in the context of when it was released, but it was released not even that long ago. Like, it's not like this was from 2009. It's not like you're going back and reading Xenosystems or even Mencius Moldbung's Unqualified Reservations, where it's like, oh, this is like mid 2000s. This was there was a time when this was fresh. I'm reading this.
He puts on this hat on social media like he's the old head, like he's the scene, right? But he really is a new guy. He is the new guy compared to most of us.
Yeah, like I'm old enough to remember a time before this. I'm like, I see where he's borrowing shit from. None of these ideas are terribly new. And there's also just on this wavelength, there's a part later in the book, he just drops this in there. And again, I'm taking this. People will hear this and say, oh, he's obviously making it up. He's obviously, and I get, you can choose to believe that, but for the people who want to say that, have you ever had to do that with any other person you like? Have you ever had to just write their stuff for them? Have you ever had to make so many excuses for someone that you apparently like? Have you ever had to like be presented with something they said and then reinterpret it for someone else and start editing it in real time? It's like, no, of course he meant that, but didn't mean this. But like, let's just assume he's being honest about the shit he did, because for all intents, I think he does. I think based on what I know about him. So when he says later in the book that he would go to gay clubs by himself with a Hitler mustache and troll gay men, what do you make of that?
Take it at face value. Just take it at face value.
Is that something you would do? Would you go to a gay club by yourself?
I'm married and I have kids and I have a garden and hobbies. I build things. I spend time with my family. But so no, I personally don't go on my own to gay clubs to quote unquote troll gays.
Even if he didn't do it, he wants you to think that he did for the sake of his argument, not believing that that's just a retarded, lame thing to do. You see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter if he did it or not. He wants you to believe this guy did. And
I as a father and husband and gardener and carpenter should be embarrassed to not have such masculine and ubermensch hobbies. Like, I don't even understand. Like, I don't actually get why that would be something anybody would want to attain to. And to me, like, just I'm generating a feeling now that people who like this honestly should be embarrassed. I know you gave a caveat at the beginning that a lot of people like this and that's cool. You could say that. Me, Judas, I don't really think so. I think I would want to hear anybody at this point who says that he's great and his book is great. I want to hear direct responses about this shit, because this is crazy.
If you like this book, you like this character, I would love to introduce you to a better character named the Macho Man Randy Savage.
Because things are just popping right now. Things are starting to cultivate. Things are starting to grow. Things are getting real colorful.
Look at that roll.
Just like the Silver Cloud Rolls Royce.
I'm very
Top
curious.
of the line.
Wait a minute. Randy.
Kilo Santana, comparatively speaking, you are like a grain of sand in the Sahara Desert. Yeah, and I am the entire desert.
Like, guys, I'm saying Ragnar Redbeard. Like, throughout time, there's always been like hyper masculine, crazed, savage guys who are big and bombastic and funny. There's some that are still alive, you know. Like,
but the thing is, this isn't that, because he's like a 5-foot, yellow-skinned, slithering gay man, Jewish man with a funny mustache at a gay club. Like, this Macho Man Randy Savage is hilarious. This this isn't that. This is not even remotely masculine. So I don't understand. I don't understand it.
Oh, also, here's another thing that he claims in his science corner. He says, chimp, in reference to captivity and slave morality and everything, he says, chimp in state of nature never jerks off, but in captivity he does. What does this mean? In state of nature, he's too busy, to put plainly. That's actually wrong. They do masturbate in nature, and we know this because we've documented
studied
their
it.
behavior. So it's just a wrong thing to say.
You're just making shit up.
And again, if it relates to the point you're trying to make, and you just say a wrong thing, well, then that's just a dumb fucking point. And it's just you not knowing what science is. So maybe you shouldn't even talk about it if you don't.
Look, you keep coming back to this idea that it's a bit, like he's being dumb as a bit. I do get that. Like, we're dumb as a bit all the time. But the whole thing about like getting laughs by, self-effacing humor or pretending to be stupid, you pepper it in to an otherwise larger topic because you are actually trying to make a serious point. You do want people to listen to you, right? So like, even on this show, the past few hours, we've peppered in a couple goofball jokes like that. But the majority of the time, we do want to be taken seriously. So if his entire book is that, then what is it actually? You can't just use that excuse for everything. So far, it's everything.
And I'm going to read some other parts that I think summarize his real philosophy a lot better. And I'm trying to be conscious of time, of course. But here's some parts. He says, the gods surely exist, but remain hidden. The gods that surely exist, but remain hidden, have the most beautiful bodies we can imagine. They appear to the ancient Greeks in dreams. Contrary to this exists the surfeit of the flesh we see on the obese, and in general the lassitude, the spiritual obesity, not only of modern life, but of many historical forms of life as well. The domestic life of the village sewer, of the fetid valleys, of matriarchy and domestics, of slaves, the pollution of cities built on filth, the place that he said he feels at home in, by the way. The life of the swamp, the life of the human animal collapsed to mere life. As it devolves to the yeast form aesthetically, morally, intellectually, physically. So he's talking about, a degeneration of life. And, a lot of people will read that and say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Okay, sure. He continues on a bit later. This will is almighty. Its forms are endless. It is no different from the fire of Heraclitus, a pervasive energy at play inside all things that seeks to order and reorder itself into ascending, uncanny objects. Its intent is mischievous and beyond our ability to understand in words. Let us strive in our decrepit, cancerous, and fetid world for what is concrete and what we can try to attain. Those who forget the body to pursue a perfect mind or perfect soul have no idea where to even start. Only physical beauty is the foundation for a true higher culture of the mind and spirit as well. Only sun and steel will show you the path. So I think that's important because, again, I do believe this to be true. He believes that physical beauty, like Mishima, is the foundation of everything else. And Mishima, for his own perverted cowardice, was very much into fitness and discipline and working out. However, I'm trying to figure out how I want to phrase this. I think starting from aesthetic beauty is a mistake. And I think it's evidence in Bronze Age Pervert himself, because, okay, you know, here's a guy who looks like he lifts. I think he's got to be close to 50 right now, right? But he's an older guy who is in shape. Sure.
He's not fat.
Yeah. From what the photos I've seen, he seems to be in shape. Whatever.
Yeah, he's in shape.
So, but all of the other stuff comes with it: the defense of trannies, the degeneracy, all, like, the being physically fit did not solve all the other bullshit surrounding Bronze Age Pervert. So it seemed to say, like, not only beauty, but the physical human form being prioritized over the soul or any sort of intellectual pursuit. That seems like a mistake. That seems like fertile soil for the most insane, perverted people to propagate. There's no filter for that. So, like, you can have a beautiful retard, you can have a beautiful psychopath. You know, like, the idea that you just start, that's the trunk of the tree, seems preposterous to me.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole thing with, like, physical fitness is one element, one facet of, what do you call that? Like Lockean freedom, or whichever, the true freedom, like where you're free from your desires. You know, you are in total control of yourself. And seeing someone who is truly fit through discipline, the fitness wasn't the goal. The self-control was the goal, right? The finding yourself and realizing your better self was the goal. The fitness is just a symptom of that. So it's almost a kind of a, not quite a cargo cult, but when it's like, no, I just want that sexy body. I want to have a sexy body like those. It's like, they weren't doing it for the body. They were doing it because there's something more pure about themselves metaphysically. I don't know. But but you're right that focusing on and just saying the whole point to this is just the beauty and sexiness of the male form. You're so off base. Not only are you just dead wrong, but using that as the foundation of everything else is just the fastest door to all of this other degeneracy. It's such a great door to degeneracy. You got to wonder whether it's intentional, whether it's an op.
And he goes further here where he says, the whole attempt to redefine identity, not just sexual identity, as a matter of decision, meaning decision made arbitrarily, is their desperate reach to find a new justification for the freedom of the will, the soul unrestrained by nature or biology. Such things make no sense when you realize you are your body and there is no you aside from this. The first lines of the Iliad make this clear. You do have a soul of sorts apart from your body, but it isn't you. It's a shade. It's completely homosexual. And I know he's probably being, like, just funny at the end there, but I there is something there that I disagree with, the idea that you are only your material form and that your spirit or your soul is not integrated in that form. It's like there's you and your consciousness in your body, and then your soul is almost just like a tail. I don't know.
Like if you're a man, you're a man because you have a male body, but your soul isn't a male soul. All souls are trans and gay.
Yeah, it's just free floating thing that has no impact on you, and I just disagree with that. I think that's philosophically cancerous to believe.
Look, without even having to disagree with it, why even bring it up? What are you getting at, Constant? What's the point here? Tell us what you're trying to say, Constant.
Yeah, and he says something here that, having covered Eliade and the myth of the eternal return and Julian Jaynes and the breakdown of the bicameral mind, I see where he thinks he's going with this next part, but having covered this stuff on the show, I think we can actually really identify just how retarded this next thing is, where he said, animals walk around in a state of permanent religious intoxication. This is the natural condition of the mind and intellect, the moment-to-moment perception of man as well. It was civilization, and in particular agricultural civilization, that forbade this condition and plunged the majority of humans into a semi-permanent regressive and depressive frame. So just to start, animals don't walk around in religious intoxication. That's stupid. But you're saying that because you want to equate man with animal and level both of them as equally religious and spiritual and have the exact same sort of soul, which to me is a total manifestation of a slave morality. Like,
Yes.
I'm sorry, like I don't know if Nietzsche says this. He's not quoting Nietzsche. I've read Nietzsche when I was a teenager, so I don't remember it line for line, but that doesn't sound like something Nietzsche was said. I'd welcome people to correct me on that, but I don't know. Like, on one hand, he's always leveling man to the level of animal, then also demanding that they rise above that and not be like humans that are all animals anyway. I don't. It's like this weird thing he does. So, now here we go. He builds upon that. He says, every adherence to an external code, religion, or ideology is inauthentic and represents essentially a form of mind control. You're adopting the thoughts of another, inappropriate for your own metabolism, biology, peculiar conditions for growth or flourishing. Yes, it is true. Nietzsche went so far as to avoid reading anything written by others so as not to infect his mind. And there was a mutant with he was a mutant with a very particular biology. Such types often are. And he was right that for them, physiology, diet may be the most pressing research necessary. So he's talking about a couple of things there. One, it's weird to adopt any thought that isn't your own, which means it's inauthentic to learn anything.
That's
You know what I mean?
just that's got at this point. It's now that's actually the dumbest thing that he said. Like, no man is an island. What are you even? How did you learn to count, you dumbass? You're gonna create your own number system? Like, what? This doesn't.
You can only generate your own internal philosophy. It's like a extreme form of egoism, like from Max Stirner, which is like I am not only the main character of the whole universe. I'm the only one that's a human, and anyone that stands in the way of what I want is subhuman and should be cast as. Why not?
It's also
why isn't that?
It's also like a managerial cultural evolution technocrat thing, where it's like, never mind all the processes and all of the institutions and the habits and the forms that we have been using for thousands of years. Never mind all of that. The only thing that actually will ever work is something that you meditate on and come up with out of whole cloth. And then the only way that you can be good and moral is by forcing it on everybody else at the point of a gun. This man is he's a bad man. He is a bad fucking guy.
And just to connect this to an idea he establishes later, because he will say in the next book and kind of in this book that the ideal configuration, the ideal grouping for men is in the war band, or basically like a pirate group or something, like a unhinged savagery, right? But I'm like, even in these groupings, there is an external code outside of yourself. In any group of men doing anything, there is something like a hierarchy. There is just like the wolf pack. There is a hierarchy. It's not just pyramid, but there is like a system in place there. But to hear him talk about adopting any sort of code or belief system or value set is inauthentic. So I'm just taking him at his word that the only way to live is as an egoist. That's what it sounds like, which is fucking insane and stupid. And I don't think he disbelieves that now. I don't think if you presented him with that... First of all, I don't think if you present Bronze Age Pervert Constant with any of this stuff, he would actually denounce it. I think he would try and tap dance around it and give you a non-answer.
It's funny because he's a Nietzsche head, and Nietzsche is the favorite philosopher of like scrawny, weird high school rejects. And scrawny, weird high school rejects also think everything is wrong with the world, and I'm the only one. Nobody understands me, and I have to come up with my own theory. Everybody listen to me. Like, it's just the most narcissistic, weird, laughable, embarrassing shit, man.
And you know what? Like, I bet some people are going to take exception to what I say now, but it is true that Nietzsche was he lived his life. I think he died of syphilis, but
he was a fucking loser.
He was plagued by maladies his entire life. He was lonely. He was very frustrated.
He was, in terms of like functionality as a human being in like life, relationships, success, happiness, health, he was a miserable embarrassment of a human being. It's great philosophy. He wrote some great shit, but like you don't want to emulate Nietzsche as a person. Like,
Well, but-
Nietzsche
because-
was
because
really
my
a
thing
sack of
is-
shit.
My thing is the philosophy that emerges from these types of minds, I think, are directly correlated to the lives they lived. And every
Yeah.
time I hear about how Arthur Schopenhauer was a loser incel, or that Kant, Immanuel Kant, those stories about how he would he was like a virgin that would make his butlers tuck him, do weird stuff, and he was just this childish dork in real life. I'm like, I can't square
It
that.
all makes sense.
And everyone acts like that's normal. It's like, well, you need to be a fucked up weirdo to come up with these great ideas. I'm like, maybe we should just stop
Maybe they're
finding
not great
ideas for fucked up. Yeah, maybe.
Who told you they were great ideas? Your public school teacher put there by the government? Who told you? Your Jewish professor at a humanities course at Columbia? Who told you these were great ideas?
You know what I would do if I was in the Vitalist sphere? I would say just read Marcus Aurelius, and that'd
go.
be it. Marcus
not?
Aurelius was the exact opposite of Arthur Schopenhauer.
I genuinely think sometimes it might be better for many people to just not even read. Like I think for working people, illiteracy might be preferable to reading all of this fucking garbage.
Yeah, but even if you have to read anything, read Marcus Aurelius. He lived a life well lived. He learned a few things. He's got some philosophies. That would probably be better for you as a warrior in training than any of this. And then you could actually
Absolutely.
get to work becoming that, instead of spending so much time reading Nietzsche, reading about a guy who's obsessed with Marcus Aurelius and the type of man that was. I'm going to get into some weird stuff. I know we got to get going, so I just want to kind of rip through this. He got this part here. We're only at the beginning of his book, by the way. He says, I don't talk about if God exists. I don't know this. I've never had any feeling for this one way or the other. I've sat in houses of religions, but I always felt nothing. It put me to sleep. Even the novelty of Buddhist or Hindu temple wore off very fast. I enjoyed the spectacle, but could tell these priests are just more pile drivers. I was always so bored. How can the secret and hidden and precious thing be about doctrine and just more talking? But so, like, you realize that how I believe this is true too. It's like you just couldn't understand what was happening. You were bored, and in your narcissistic haze, you realize, well, this is dumb. This is a trick. You know what I mean? Like you're anti-discipline in that sense. You're within a cathedral, and it doesn't feel like doing a line of cocaine. So you think it must be a fraud. That's because the way you define enlightenment and the way you define health or even intellectual pursuits is so fucking twisted. It's so twisted and sick. And look, he's like, but, and I don't know why people put these things together, because for me, they never had anything to do with each other. Even as a small boy, I felt every object was inhabited by an uncanny shadow or spirit.
You're a mutant.
I paid honor to certain toys and certain objects. I found outside and hid carefully. No one ever taught me to do this. I found a dead animal and buried it with ceremony. I always felt I could talk to animal and that they were my brothers and sisters. This animism is the natural religion of man. See, it's just like, again, taking him as word, you just did some weird things as a kid and you just never moved on from that. It sounds like you think you can talk to animals as like a 12-year-old. You think, oh, this is actually what religion is. For what the fuck is this? Who read this and thought this was good? Do you guys read this shit? Go back.
Yeah.
I promise you, it's not that long. So he makes a claim here, and this is one where I'm not sure it's right, but he says, youth and beauty are universally hated in almost all human societies in history. That doesn't sound right, does it? Like every single human society has hated beauty. Maybe he means physical beauty, but that doesn't sound right either.
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, this is just insanity.
That's an incoherent, but that grounds everything he's about to say. These societies are run by decrepit, sclerotic men. Sometimes they use image of fat woman, Earth Mother, to beat the young men over the head with and make them submit.
Oh, he looked at one case of fat Earth Mother and he worked backwards from that and said all ancient civilizations hated beauty.
And also, like, apparently, I guess medieval Europe and also Japan and also Mesopotamia.
This is Twitter Guy Reacts the book. That's what this is.
Yeah, this is just like it's such ahistorical nonsense that, and he does study history. He will cite sources in his next book, but something like that is so ahistorical that I'm like, you to read that and like it, you need to think he's being sarcastic. Customs and religious authorities that concern themselves with how you should wipe your ass, brush teeth, how many fingers to insert in anus to receive such and such magical medical goal, petty legalisms of all kinds. The Shiite sect amongst Muslims and rabbinical Judaism are most like this. All have all of this smothers genuine religious enthusiasm and the true oracular science from which can evolve arts and great beauty. And that actually is his next book. That's the thesis of the next book. But he believes that all these rules and all these spiritual disciplines cage your true intoxication with religion, which, by the way, is something he has never felt in his life except when burying animals in the backyard or talking to his toys. Like, always remember to read this book. To like the current paragraph, you must forget the preceding paragraph. Mm-hmm. This book doesn't really work if you remember what he said 2 pages before. So realize that the only things that have gotten him truly energized in this life are hanging out in squalid third world sex tourist places, going to gay bars dressed as Hitler to troll gay men, wink wink, and also talking to your toys. And from that, he has decided that all religion is fake because he's incapable of ever turning his gaze upon himself. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's a profound. I don't want to psychoanalyze him, but this is a broken man. I think. I think. I don't know. I don't want to get too far into that, but. He says here, beauty is the very rare and precious preserve of tribes that have striven to promote child making from something other than financial, social, and political gain. I actually agree with that. Okay, that's an idea that's interesting. Let's pull on that thread. No, the promotion of ugliness is nearly universal, and the love of beauty is so rare. Among the great civilizations, only the ancient Greeks, the French, the Japanese, and somewhat the Italians are true lovers of beauty and refinement, and have based their existence exclusively on the promotion of beauty.
I don't think he knows. Yeah, I don't think he knows what beauty is. Actually, I think this is a very neurotic, broken man who thinks that beauty is tits and oiled pecs. Like, I don't think does he look at a chalet in the Swiss Alps and not think that is beautiful? Like, I guess the Swiss have no concept of beauty. Like, I don't understand.
The British had a conceptualization of beauty. Arguably the Vikings. I mean, if you want to look at your vitalist heroes, why don't you ever cite the types of societies that you say are superior, like the Vikings, like the Huns, like the Mongols? And the Mongols have a conceptualization of beauty, then why are they the society that you think is ideal?
And in beauty isn't free. So in hard scrabble societies like the Vikings and the Mongols, you're going to have to find that beauty in the moments between hard tasks. So you're going to find small crafts. I'm sorry, you're not going to find, these massive like Titian marble statues in Viking society. That isn't because they didn't like beauty. That's because they could barely eat. Like, this is just, it doesn't even make sense. We're overanalyzing this because it's retarded from page 1. Like, there's no way he thought of any of this.
He says, if you want to see our future, look to Europe as it existed before 1600 BC, or much of the world as it was until recently and still is. The communal life of the Longhouse, with its young men dominated and broken by the old and sclerotic, by the matriarchs, the blob, and the yeast mode of human life overtaking and subjecting all higher aspiration. Aztec cities with 20 morons sleeping and eating off the floor, demagogued in the masses by blood-hungry priests with dead eyes. It's no different than they use doxies of reason and logos to cart us off to this life. So he's saying that, the Aztec cities are essentially no different than the logos of, Christianity or Catholicism, basically, which is a stretch, but it's also, you'll see he's getting into sort of fictitious poetry here. Like he's talking about dead-eyed priests, but there is an idea there, and this is what people latch onto: the idea of the Longhouse. I just wanted to take a break here and let's really talk about the Longhouse, because as we've said in previous episodes, most people have an incorrect conceptualization of what the Longhouse actually is. And I've made a comment before that when people talk about the Longhouse, it seems to change definitionally between whichever group is wielding it. For some people, the Longhouse just means feminism, modern feminism. Some will say third wave feminism, right? Some people will say that the Longhouse is modernity or something. But in its definition provided here by Bronze Age Pervert, and I believe this is still how he uses it, the Longhouse is civilization itself. As he's already established, the Longhouse is this idea of subjugation at all to any ideology, to any new idea, to any value set, or civilization, society, the village, community itself is the Longhouse. And that's what keeps you, the individual, back from trying to achieve greatness. And then he sort of brings that together with, and these are essentially dominated by women. In that sense, there's never been a patriarchy. I think that's the extension what he's talking about here. There's never, even if, which is funny considering he's such an advocate of Camille Paglia, the idea is that civilization has always been run by feminized old men and women. There's only been a matriarchy in that sense, which I guess I fundamentally disagree with. You know what I mean? Because that means that anytime you coordinate with other men, anytime you enter into a grouping with other men, you're feminizing yourself. Does that sound
No, I mean,
right?
Did he coin the phrase Longhouse? I don't think he did.
Well,
did he?
He would have coined it in this application, but the Longhouse is what it sounds like. It's just a long house that people would.
Well, look, I know historically what a Longhouse is. What I mean is my understanding recently in the cultural context, a Longhouse is when you have weak people and the women and the old and the broken and the outsider controlling your society, not just the society that has any system or control whatsoever.
That's how we understand it, and I'm trying to clarify that he says all society is that.
Literally any civilization whatsoever. Like, no, that's straight up retarded.
Including a town. The idea of entering and living in the Longhouse, which is living in a communal shelter of any kind, is effectively matriarchal and feminized. And
wow.
Then the masculine way of living would be riding your horse across the steppes or the plain and
that's
like
why Constantine lives like a pirate. That's why he doesn't live in a very nice condo in New York.
Yeah. And he
like
says it in
so...
here, but I if I don't get to it, that's why he says like the entire idea of blood and soil is feminine. The idea of caring about the land or having a home or setting up roots, he says that's feminine.
Of course, because he's an unmarried Jew. So
and to be essentially a wandering cosmopolitan is the only masculine mode of being. Like I'm not trying to make fun of him either. That's
just what he says. Saying. We're just reading the book.
And like, and again, me reading the book and quoting him, there's still people who are like, no, he doesn't mean that. I'm like, sure, continue writing your own Bronze Age mindset in your fucking head. It's gotten you this far, right? Why is it that so many, there's some guys who lift to Bronze Age mindset, Caribbean rhythms? It seems to me that most of his fans are out of shape dorks, though. What's that about?
Sorry.
Honestly, it's like our Andrew Tate. Like you look at Andrew Tate, how many of his fans are just kind of nebbishy dweebs listening to another like obvious fucked up mind?
I mean, demographically, the average age of Tate fans is like 13. Like that's not a joke. He largely skews to like middle schoolers.
Yeah. Here's a part that you're going to find interesting because he gets into trannies and homosexuals. And a lot of people will say that he is anti-transgender. I'm sure he's not endorsing it. He's not in favor of it. But I did detect a tone in this where I'm just going to read it because I think it needs to be heard, and then I'll explain it. He says, the gay, the homosexual, the gay is the spiritual foot soldier of the new regime when he is born to be its enemy. This is the unusual part of this realization, that some of the most sensitive and perceptive youths, those maybe imbued with spark of inspiration and a conquering, expanding spirit, end up becoming the vanguard of that which has smothered and broken them. In a previous age, they wouldn't have been gay at all in the first place. The story of such boy is story of all higher types of our time. The defeated male that has turned into a peon and is neutered, and a neutered beast for women and hidden masters is a terrible thing to see. So what he's saying is, like, the homosexuals in another time wouldn't be homosexuals. They would be the coolest and most masculine guys ever. Which is a strange thing to say.
That was pretty slippery, yeah.
Yeah,
You say they're not bad because they're gay. They're bad because the regime has brainwashed them. Like, no, they're bad because they're gay.
They're the real rebels. They're the real masters. But it's only in this society that they've been made so effeminate. However, we should look upon the homosexual man as the oppressed hero that he is. That's basically what he's saying. Our world is the house of subjection. Homosexuals live in the estate of freedom and power. It is only that with the relatively large number of gays that exist, this world was much larger than it is now and more varied, and its entry points more penetrable. The space of night that gays created for themselves, in which such types could at least feel they had a new opportunity to expand and act, was nuked in the 1980s with AIDS, first of all, and then at the same time with the gay rights and gay identity movement, which through which they came out in the open. Okay, so let's just, he goes on, but let's just unpack that. And I challenge people who've read this and said this was cool to begin with. What he's saying is that the best part of the gay identity was the degenerate nightclub lifestyle, the dank and seedy underbelly of cities, basically sucking dick in Central Park. That was the cool part of gay culture. And he says that it was only stopped by AIDS, as if AIDS was not directly related to this lifestyle.
Yeah,
like really, just people.
That's insane.
People
That's
who
insane.
people who like this Jewish gay man, please, for the love of God, let's just concentrate that he says the coolest part of gay men was the degeneracy, and it's only stopped because AIDS fell out of the fucking sky one day.
Damn, son, where'd you find
Stop ass rape!
I was gonna say, it's so much fun. The thrill of driving your car off a cliff, you can't even compare it. If it weren't for just fucking gravity, that one snag that just ruins it. I hate, like, no, that's part of it. You have wild sex with strangers in Central Park, then you die of AIDS. You deserved it. You're a degenerate. Like, how do you not connect those dots?
Yeah. Homosexuality in our age, in any case, is unlike any behavior of the past. It represents one of the characteristic ways that some of the most unusual specimens respond to domestication and are broken by it. So really, the gays they would be our saviors if not distinctly broken by modernity.
The true Sigmas.
Yes, that's what he's saying, people.
Yeah.
Okay, now
It's not that they're disgusting mutants that in a previous age we literally culled from the civilization. Like, we just killed them. We got rid of them. And then we didn't have to deal with them.
He spent the whole book up until now saying that the degenerate periphery of society is where all the cool stuff happens. Does what he's doing now make sense to you people? Okay. He's got a weird thing here. He says, nevertheless, in spirit, I would say even now, the European has much more in common with the African than with the Asian, meaning the inhabitant of the broad swathe of land stretching from Han China in the Near East that includes the long-settled farming serf regions of the planet. I know many dorks who fetishize IQ above all else will disagree with this. The Orient and Asia has always been the enemy. Africa is mostly irrelevant. The African may even be an ally and only become a problem under conditions of modern mass democracy. So I don't know, like that. There's a lot
I
to
don't
unpack
totally
there.
I don't totally disagree with that, but I don't know how we got to that from sucking dick.
He's saying that, because I am jumping ahead a few things here, but he's saying that
Okay.
like the European has more in common with the savage African than with the bureaucracy of the
No.
Orient.
Absolutely not. I mean, that's just straight up false on every facet. But saying that our true enemy is the Orient and the African is irrelevant, yeah, that's fair.
That's a political position I would agree with. But he's like, we have more in common with the African. Like, I see what you're trying to say. What you're trying to say is that there's a shared savagery, whereas with the Eastern Oriental mind, they are so broken and collectivist that, you know, I do agree with that. That's why I don't think you should seek
But
out allies.
But
over
I don't
there.
even agree. If we're talking about society, like civilization on a large time frame, Africans are uniquely cowardly and stupid. They're not good fighters. They're not well organized.
They are communal.
This
They
whole,
are communal, right?
This whole concept of Africans being like these great, like savage warrior people, they're not. They are tiny, cowering animals. You're thinking of blacks in Chicago. We hand selected eugenically the toughest, angriest ones for slaves. That's where we got those.
And this is what it's funny. I'm glad you pointed it out, because again, like 10 pages ago in the book, he will cite Africa as one of the places dominated by the Longhouse. They have longhouses in Africa.
Right.
What do you mean? Like, I don't understand. Like, if the whole world is longhouses, except in the exact same type of human organization, except for fucking Italy and Greece and Japan. Okay, like, how can you say? Sorry, this is just even striking me as how stupid this is. You just said that we'll never have anything in common with any Easterner, but you said that the only people who understand beauty are like the Japanese and Italians,
Right.
and the Italians
So,
are kind of North African in a sense. But like,
you're saying
why is Japan in there?
The Japanese have no history of like an honorable martial culture. What's the warrior culture? Show me one African civilization that had anything approaching like the Shogun era of Japan. Like, I can't. Give me one fucking example. Like,
Yeah. All right. So here's another part. Again, this is like a weird thing he says. He says, merry old England, for example, was a place of joy and drunkenness and feasts. They drank ale without hops, but used gruit made from heather and other herbs. They drank they had all day, filling them with the passion of life. Beer at this time was a stimulant and aphrodisiac. They considered the water drinker much the same way we look at dry hipster herb who stirs caffeine-free rhubarb and looks at you with dour eyes. I mean, I don't think that's true. But before this, the people of England had surely more intense sexors. That's SEX0RZ for people who are wondering if that's how you measure things. Actually, it's how you should measure things, because it's a sign of something else. A life of great and real joy or passion is a life of receptive to human instincts. So he's saying that English people being drunk and debaucherous all the time was superior to how they're living currently. You know what I mean? Like, so again, it's hedonism and debauchery, which is the root of what he thinks the stuff of life is.
well, I mean, and he's scratching at something real, which is that there's a natural element of joy and beauty and value in sex and drinking and socialization, but that isn't. But he's saying like that's literally life, and as long as you achieve those things and only those things, then you've reached your highest potential. And that flies in the face of literally every single school of Western thought over 2,000 years. So, like, I don't know what to tell you. You're just retarded. You're a retarded degenerate.
We talked about this at the top. It's like we talk about truth and beauty, that vitalism is about truth and beauty. How has he defined beauty thus far? It's inebriation and gay shit and living in the shadows, living in the filth. You know, he talks about how bad the filth is. You know what I mean? Like, he's hating on the global south while saying that he finds truth and beauty in the global south. You see what I'm saying? Like, how has he defined beauty so far? It's disgusting and hedonistic.
He's just incoherent.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. I felt myself grabbed with a fast spirit and ejaculated all kinds of words in a Tourette way. I went to troll gay bars with Hitler mustache and outraged the patrons there with stories of the National Socialists starting out as a gay rights movement. Hunger for space, claustrophobia, the most noble phobia isn't just spiritual. Anyway, so the idea that also you went to a gay club and like gay guys aren't just like Jews. You know, if you went to a gay, I would imagine if you went to a gay club and say, did you know the Nazis used to be a gay rights group? They would probably ask you for poppers and MDMA. Like, who are you trolling? Like, you're at a fucking gay club. You weren't going to a fucking Ben Shapiro speech.
Did you think they were serious people?
Yeah, I believe you went to a fucking gay club in a small mustache. I believe you. I don't think you went there to own the libs. All right, so I'm just going to try and wrap this up now. Okay, so it says, I want this chaos because I want this chaos because what I want to bring thrives in it. The continuity of history, if not its progress, is the last start of secular scientific man unmoored by the universe on this floating rock, the play of Titanic and foreign forces. It's the last connection that he had to any sanity. I want a world of psychosis. I want the end of his sanity. I think that's I believe him. I believe that's what he wants. You could say that's, accelerationism. I'm not sure. I don't think that's a political strategy. I don't think he's saying, I want to accelerate the destruction of modernity. I think that's his preferred state of being. I think his preferred stasis is chaos because he believes that from this valueless, religionless chaos emerges the only true appreciation of beauty and truth. However, we have only defined beauty and truth in hedonistic terms. Oh, even here, just to back that up, he says the pirate, the true warrior, not the modern soldier in subjugation to a high brass eunuch. So just to let you know, he's calling all soldiers faggots. Like he's calling SEAL Team 6. Like, yeah, you guys have nothing on pirates. Like, by the way, we also have pirates now. There's pirates out there. They're all just fucking Filipino. They're all just like illiterate, scrawny rapists.
What is it about pirates, aside from the fact that they don't follow any rules? They also don't have any self-control. Like you said, they're usually short, malnourished, weak, cowardly, stupid, incompetent. And the only reason they survive is because they follow absolutely no rules. So they will win by killing children. Whereas the SEAL team actually has to follow rules. They have to have discipline. They have to work as a team. They have to be intelligent. Like, what are you?
It's also, look at the examples. Like, we have examples. Like, did pirate? Like, first of all, are you thinking of pirates, or are you thinking of Pirates of the Caribbean?
I was about to say.
Are you thinking of Assassin's Creed Black Flag? Is that kind of what you're thinking of?
Yeah, he got his concept of pirates from like Disneyland.
Yeah. Pirates of the past were a lot like pirates now, which is what we just described.
They were fat retards.
But you also they were like the Mongols. They were like the Huns. Or they known for appreciating and generating truth and beauty?
Yeah, they love truth and beauty?
Like, yeah, we've had this, you fucking maniac. Also, what's interesting about the Mongols specifically is that's a phenomenal example of, I wrote about this on the Vanguard's Journal about how what we might call the barbarians, but barbarians as a general grouping that exists outside of the empire's center of power and are always drawn towards it. This was the Mongols, this was the Huns as well. They're always drawn towards civilization from the wastes, from the steppes. And why is that? Because they actually want what's in the civilization 100% of the time. That's what the Vikings wanted too. There's so many stories about like Eric the Red and these characters. Like, what they wanted to do was settle. Like, most Vikings didn't want to just raid and pillage forever. And they were always trying. Like, they settled Ireland. They settled wherever they fucking went. A lot of the times they settled, because that was what got most Viking warriors. That was the goal in their lives. Just like the Huns were always magnetized to Rome, and the Mongols actually succeeded. They took over the Chinese dynasties for a while and were eventually subsumed by it. That was the end of the Mongols, is that they were so desperate to be in proximity and be submerged in a civilization that eventually overtook them. So I don't know, you could say that, they're corrupted by it, but they're also drawn to it. So I guess it's inevitable, right? And you know who actually had a good understanding of this? British aristocrats. The British nobility, if you know anything about them, who's more highfalutin, the British nobility. However, they understood the value of the wild hunt. They understood the value of the orgy. Like, you would have these aristocrats who would still go hunt because they know we need to rekindle this bloodlust, this animalistic savagery inside of us, and go into the fucking woods with guns, and they would do this. They would have these unhinged, chaotic moments, and they were able to balance that with civilization. It's interesting how they can do that, but the fucking Mongols and the Huns and the pirates couldn't. And I don't hear the British brought up as examples of ideal anything in this. So maybe it sounds like you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, you moron. The pirate, the true warrior, not the modern soldier, is the only free man. And it is this freedom, this primal freedom of the Bronze Age, that some must recapture before anything else is to be done. Listen to what Tacitus says of the ancient Germans. They preferred to win through the battle two things of life, and considered it mean and petty to work the land and sweat and toil rather than get their living by their spears and by risking their blood. I mean, that's not even necessarily true. Like, I always call back to the Huns. They were drawn to Rome because they hated living in the fucking wilderness. Why didn't they stay there? It's not like they were roaming in every single direction. They were always magnetized to the civilization, to the heart of the empire, because they wanted to dominate it and they wanted to fucking stay there. And every single time they were either absorbed or cast out. Every single fucking time. And we can see it right now. We still have tribes like this. We still have pirates like this. Are they the Bronze Age manifest? No, you will, Bronze Age Pervert I'll point to them and say, we can't let those people take over the world. They're scum. They're illiterate. They're longhoused. Everyone's longhoused, even the pirates. Because guess what? The Vikings had longhouses.
We're going to need to end this around here, but just like the opening example I gave with the vitality that he seeks, jumping into the volcano and having that sort of primitive faith that would drive you to believe that you could be a god through suicide. He mentions this here. He captures a representation of what he's talking about and what the Bronze Age mindset really is. So I'm just going to read this. I think this really summarizes it, and you have to figure out if you believe in this. So he said, of the group that he's saying he identifies the most with, he says, they were the true artistes. Take, for example, Periander of Corinth. This man's name means literally Superman. At no point in his life as king of Corinth did he restrain his lust for the darkest paths. It is said he copulated with his mother, that he violated his wife's corpse, and much worse. He had all the boys on the island of Corcyra castrated, and having done all this, he was memorialized as one of the sages or geniuses of the ancient world. He only ever saw political office as a means to self-overcoming and self-perfection, as a way to turn himself into a living work of art. From this came for the citizens much good and also much bad. It has to be expected that such men will appear as monsters to others. In any case, the things he did were hardly the worst. One other man I can think of, a tyrant or a king, have at what you will. He married off the women of his state to slaves. Through this overturning of values that he learned from Plato, he secured his infamy and power. Periander understood his position as king. Periander understood his position as king then as just another means. Here, science, here, art could be free from all limits and could rule unhindered and embark on great experiments. Yet from all this you see something very strange. The secret desire of every Greek, the Bronze Age mindset, was to be worshipped as a god. As you're hearing that, you might consider a few things. One of them is you haven't really described what good he did for the people. You haven't seemingly explained what he did that wasn't cruel pranks upon his population and triggering their intense suffering at a whim. Now, he very well could have. I haven't read up on Periander of Corinth, this icon of the Bronze Age mindset, but it sounds to me, just from this description, that he was a deranged tyrant who, I don't know, did not facilitate the growth or even really the genetic bottlenecking of his population. Because you could also say, oh, if he was cruel to the dysgenic, if he was cruel to criminals, you could say, oh, well, he was removing that from their gene pool. This is the argument that has been made in favor of other European countries for how they attained their character by just exiling or killing the most dysgenic parts of their population, whereas other cultures would let them either thrive or exist in stasis. Fair enough. But he's just saying he's marrying all the women as slaves and like castrating everyone. And I fail to see how that benefits. I fail to see how that benefits him. But let's just say it does. This is like very much a Nero character. Did Nero truly benefit Rome? That has not been established here. Neither has it with Periander. So I agree that this is the Bronze Age mindset in human form. It is a man who raped his mother and defiles corpses and castrates children and sends off all the best genetic stock to be humiliated sexually. Yeah, I agree that that's your guy. And I leave it up to the listeners to decide if that if they gel with that at all.
It's frustrating how bad this is and how people are like, no, you just got to go with it. No, there's nothing to go with. It's not interesting. It's written poorly. And if you actually pay attention and read it with intent, you will see something dark lurking in here, in my opinion. And I'm sorry, we have to get going now. We didn't get through some of the other stuff, but I think that captures what I think are some of the more like interesting flashpoints in the book. And we'll be moving on to the sequel next episode. But I hope I steel man some, like, if you read this and got something out of it, good for you. I just don't know how you could. I really don't.
Yeah.
And I would beg you to read it again and read it carefully. And there's a lot of subversive shit in here that maybe you didn't notice the first time, but it's there, and it explains all the weird, fucked up things that are happening in that space right now.
Do not let the rapists win. Listen and love Blood Satellite.